Good evening, everyone watching. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you tonight to an interesting conversation around the music genre that we all like, and I guess that's why we all are gathered here. My name is Brenda Sisani, and I'm with Kaya FM on Sundays. I present a show that really speaks about jazz music, and I'm always considering the fact that there's always a question about what really is jazz music. And my guest today, being Gideon Nxumalo, is one person who can speak about that, particularly in relation to the film today, because it is a film that dispels any questions you may have around the relationship of traditional African music and jazz music. So I'm going to get right into it, and let's, and just take us from the top in terms of this. I know you all would like to hear a lot more from Gideon Nxumalo, but in the interest of the platform and the format of this whole conversation, we're going to keep it to 20 minutes, and then we'll be able to have your Q&A, question and answers for Gideon to answer them. Gideon Nxumalo is known to have directed, for instance, We Are the Elephant, which is reputed to be one of the best films ever made about the struggle against apartheid by South African students. He's also known to be an educator on how to write commentary for documentaries. His other credits over decades include titles such as Blue Notes and Exile Voices, Time and Judgment, A Diary of a 400-Year Exile. He has contributed as a director, working with sound within the industry, serving on various juries and panels in selection processes, even fundraising funding for film, as well as giving just strategies for the nation in terms of how film could play a role in social development. Gideon is therefore no newcomer to the world and work of cinema. This year's Encounters Documentary Film Festival features his film that portrays a rare and stunning tribute to South Africa's jazz icons. It's called Listen to My Song. So thank you very much for this opportunity to talk about your film, Gideon. Welcome, and it's a great pleasure to have you here today on our discussion. My first one for you, Gideon, is that I'm really curious to know what you knew about Gideon Nxumalo that sparked an interest big enough to inspire a movie. I'd like to start there.
Thank you, Brenda. I think I've known about Gibe from the 70s already, but his enormity, I did not realize that actually this was the person at the center of South African jazz music. It's only when I was in London in exile, doing a lot of research, then I really came to know why Gibe was so central to South African jazz music. Mm-hmm. But after seeing a film made by Henning Carlson, based on Nadine Gordimer's film, book, The World of Strangers, what struck me was that actually The World of Strangers captured South African jazz like never it was before. Mm-hmm. Henning Carlson actually documented a very key, important moment in South African jazz of the 50s and 60s. Mm. So I never looked back. So at the back of my mind, I've always wanted to make this film. And when the opportunity came, it came in a roundabout way. I was doing an oral, history documentation of South African, musicians, especially the 50s, 60s generation, because I felt that they had no voice, and this was a disappearing you know, group of elders. So I did a lot of individual, you know, bios on them. Actually, I started with Kipimwekesi, you know, I made a small, you know, film on Kipi, Blues for Kipi. So yeah, I'm passionate about this generation because I think what they have achieved and did for South African, you know, music, rather the South African struggle generally, is something that we have not yet come to comprehend. There are very few reference books, as it were. You know, even the discography, it's somewhat, you know, scattered all over the place. So listen to my song. I believe it's the entree is the, you know, or maybe second step after blues for Kipi. So yeah,
Wow.
I think.
What a beautiful introduction, you know, covering the entire spectrum of the importance of this film by virtue of your introduction, Bradley. You talk about disappearing elders. One of the things that stood out for me in the movie was just how it was so important to address a conversation where young people look at the works that we're talking about around the 50s and the 60s, and they look at that as old works. But here's a film that gives you a set of characters who look young, who are in their early 20s, 30s, and who are, you know, who show the same passion that any young person today and the hunger that they indulge. And I think it's for me, one of the great recipes for this film that attracted me. I would really like to come in and talk also about the fact that the conversation of struggle, heritage, and appreciation is a necessary conversation wherein the balance of all three is important, because South Africa's history hasn't been excavated, and the response to this film is living proof of that. I would like to, within what I've just said, to share with us how the components came together in telling the story, because I see that you use various mediums, you use live, you use archives, and so on. Could you share with us that?
Yeah, quite so. I think making a documentary clearly requires you to bring to the fore evidence. Documentary, it's really about you bringing very interesting moments. I think if you saw the Ledambulu clip, where, you know, the ticket stub where he opened for Monk. That's a very key important moment, because who else would have imagined that? So when I got, you know, that piece of, you know, clip, Latambulu, Theologist Monk, I mean, you can imagine what happened to me. It really now opened up even more vistas. But having said that, one wants to pay tribute to the late Johnny Megwa, Linda Mgoma, Kaya Maslangu, and the whole family of musicians who really supported this effort. Because without them, I could not have done it. This was like a big project, working with minimal, money, but the support I got from everybody was overwhelming. And the generation, Uncle Stompy is in his 80s, yeah? So if you look at just the age was like 18 to 80. And yeah, it was a magical, moment. And on the bandstand, that whole orchestra, oh, I mean, Prince, Malcolm,
Dr. Chabani was, yes.
Bani Rachabani was in his element, Banza, I mean, yeah. So, Nkanyezi Tele, phenomenal, drama. Excuse me. So, yeah. But the way the interviews also were shot, they were musical. There was no dull moments, So it was music, throughout. And so Fimdena, actually, he came out of hospital. When I interviewed her, she still had, the drip marks, in her hands, so shortly thereafter, she passed on. So, yeah. So that's why I'm saying this is a disappearing, generation. I had to, in a sense, work faster. Not that I'm not saying people were dropping dead, but I could not just but sit back. I had to really, intervene. So most of them have got their personal bios, the small stories. So the film really, there's more to it. We've got more, in-depth interviews, with them. So I just called on the top to get, the important, bits. Sol Rachilo, oof.
Sorry about that, Braden. You've actually just shared a beautiful light about how it's such a almost like a name-dropping a moment when you watch this film, because of all these stellar names that are featured and who are sharing so passionately about the music, the art form, and the history. And for me, I was quite interested in the entire research process. You find a film that was made underground, that not everybody has access to. You find stubs of tickets for jazz clubs where Thelonious Monk was performing. It needed to have somebody who understands the music, who understands the spaces to go to. And I think it will be a great learning curve to understand how you plotted the entire research to inform the storyline, really.
Yeah, I think research is quite central. Fortunately, I'm a very keen researcher. I don't leave no stone unturned, but also over the 40 years as a practicing filmmaker, I have quite a very vast archives of film, but also I'm a stills photographer. I've been, for the last, 18 years I lived in London. I could say I photographed almost the entire South African, music, fraternity. This has been, my life. So, and I read a lot, yes, I think South African, modernity, 1897 from Kimberley, with Soul Plucker and them, they had a big philharmonic, organization. So actually discovering the playlist of the Soul Plucker, Philharmonic, that's another film that could be made. So everything that has to do with, South African modernity, I've always, followed the birth of the, recording of South African music, because South African music, we have to understand, was recorded as far back as 1923. I mean, Soul Plake, actually did the first album, Zonophone, records in Middlesex, he recorded already 1924. So that's a story, still unknown. So you can imagine, if you look at, Soul Plake, the performer, the musician, so there's so much to tell about our music, and I think academics, cultural, scholars, we need to bring all this archive, together, so that the younger new generation can begin to put all the pieces together, so that this jigsaw, can culminate into a much more larger, tradition. Especially the South African jazz standard is something that we also need to document. Yeah.
Glenn Ujeba Masukwane's wonderful documentary called Listen to My Song is the subject of the moment, and you're revealing all this, the opportunities that lie within filmmaking, music, and culture of South Africa that we can use. In fact, I just realized that the classroom would benefit a lot. This is a wonderful way of teaching history. But let's talk about Gideon Nxumalo. Let's talk about the title, Listen to My Song. Within a platform of a film that showcases, even at that time, the thespians, even, the talents of Ernest Cole, who does the interview, for instance. And yet it's a film that also has a big band album that comes out of that, in the making of all of this, that there's so many potent portions of it that can be used in various ways of teaching within, the school, and also within the music training, as well as filmmaking itself. What is the ultimate message of the film when there's all this richness that surrounds it, and why title it the way you did, and why centralize it around Gideon Nxumalo per se, and how do you feel you succeeded in getting all of this to make so much sense?
Well, the story could not be told without having a central character like Gideon Nxumalo. It's not a single character driven story, not that. But you see, Gibe has left a lot of written, music. He was a pioneer amongst his peers. He was highly respected within the, music fraternity. He was a leader in his own right, but also he was very accessible. If you see the scores that this man left, I mean, it's volumes. It's I still need to encounter, that amount of music left behind by a South African, musician. I mean, scores, hand, written. Perhaps maybe JP Mohapelwa would be closer to Gideon. You know, Gideon wrote hymnals. He wrote for duets, big band. You know, yeah, he comes out of Roma University. You know, was taught by a Jesuit, you know, Catholic, you know, priest. You know, he wrote and annotated music, which was a very rare skill amongst his peers at the time. You know, so he was no, yeah. That's a power that he had. He could his yeah his famous composition, you know, African jazz fantasia. You know, fantasia as a form of, you know, musical scores. You know, fantasia, it's a genre, and he, you know, already, you know, African jazz fantasia, made of 5 movements. You know, this is a guy who was very erudite and scholarly around, you know, music. He was not just a performer, everything. Oh, actually,
yeah,
he did jazz chorales. You know, he's got also a jazz mass, you know, perform. Oh, yeah. You know, he's, yeah. What else can you say about him, Gibe? He dies at 42. He was still very young. But also he was quite sad. He was very um, disappointed. I think his generation, you must understand, the 50s and the 60s, South Africa was under the heavy, you know, jackboot of apartheid, fascism. There was no opportunity. So, but people like Gideon Nxumalo, you know, Makay Davashe, Kipu Mwekezi, these are fighters, despite, you know, apartheid. They made the difference, you know. Sissofu Mdina, Miriam Makeba, you know, Dolly Ratebe. So yeah, these are real formidable, you know, cultural, you know, activists, you know. Yeah, Eli Mabuza, you know. Yes,
sorry, you know, the tragedy of genius at the height of apartheid, you know, is literally something that leaves behind so much, you know, weight. And I just wanted to bring in other conversations so that we can hear other voices that have seen the film. You've got a question that says from Sulfero Kwakwa. He says it's an absolutely remarkable film. It offers such great insight to the South African jazz scene, especially coming from first-hand experiences of our jazz icons. What inspired your choices on who to interview and exclude for the film?
That's a very difficult question. You know, this is oral history. We should understand it from that point of view. So there were no choices made or exclusions. I tried to, you know, when you make a film, there's so much you can put in, but you have to have a structure. And I tried to make sure that I gave different voices and different perspectives. Some of them didn't even speak. Look at Philip Dabani, for instance. He was discovered by, you know, Gideon Nxumalo, because when Gideon discovered Philip Dabani, because Philip Dabani was deconstructing jazz and giving it an African perspective, Malombo. And that was Gideon Nxumalo's, real point about it, bringing in, African indigenous, I don't like the word indigenous music, but okay, indigenous music into mainstream, jazz. So, yeah, but there were Sophie Mdena was very central because this is a person who really performed a lot with Gideon. So is Aunt Abigail. You saw them there, yeah. So in many ways, the film speaks for itself. My voice was hardly there ever. So, yeah, Uncle Johnny Megwa said it all. The person who I did not bring in, unfortunately, is A.B. Tindi. Not because his interview was not, interesting, but he was not excluded. He wasn't, he was a student of Gideon Nxumalo. Gideon used to teach at AMDA, which was like the forerunner to the current, music schools. Yeah. So making the choices, it was difficult, but I think the choices I made allowed me to make an interesting, film. The talking heads are not really talking heads. I think when these are interesting people. Yeah, it is, yeah, I could say this is the Hall of Fame of South African jazz. I was fortunate to have all these people open up and give me that time because they, I suppose they believed that I've got the capability and I've been with them over, many years. So it was time that, this film is made with our participation. And yeah, it was a great honor to have all of them, come together within listen to my song. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've got another question. Thank you very much for that, Tsholofelo. It's a great question. Mandi Sazita says, what an amazing achievement would Glenn, the music, archive, and characters create a unique and informative film. How did you go about funding the project? How long did it take you?
Ooh, funding. I was supported by the Department of Arts and Culture, Oral History Fund. It was a very small window, then, not a lot of money, so, and I'm not trying to hide the figures,
it's okay.
But there also was support from MTN also for the big band because everywhere I went, I had to justify where the money was going. So it was money, I think, onto the screen. GFC, Gauteng Film Commission, thank you very much to them. And one must thank Peter Clady and Sipho Dlamini, who believed in the film. So I got a bit of, support. Yeah, and NFVF supported the current post-production. And these are not huge, monies by any stretch of imagination. So you could say a lot was, sweat equity, labor of love. I was doing what I wanted to do, and made sure that the people who are supporting me are not coming in. I was not asking for freebies. No, everybody who participated was remunerated. So at that level, me and the fraternity were still friends. I mean, with everybody, you know. And without their contribution and investment, I don't think we can begin to quantify that in monetary terms, you know. So yeah, I would say, broadly speaking, the film was made under 500K. Wow. And that's really, you know, it's a major, you know, achievement. Yeah, we're scraping the barrel, but we still, you know, we stayed in there.
You did well. I mean, it's interesting that you reveal that, Platlen. The other part of the question was about the time it took to get this film started and to get here. I think it took a decade, didn't it?
Oh, well, I would say 8 years making that film. Okay. And also, you must understand why it took such a long time. There's a time I used to work for the Department of Arts and Culture. So I could not serve two masters. I had to, you know, pause. It's only after I retired from the DAC that I concentrated in making the film. So, and I could not get support from the DAC being an officer. I wouldn't do that. And it was not even in my mind. I never even put it there for support. No, you know, that's not my style. You know, actually.
Speaking of style, Bradlen, I think there's a whole lot of style that is invested in the movie. I think the way I've enjoyed looking at the characters and how they were presented. I wanted to just use the last few minutes we have to pose another interesting question for you that may take a bit of a while before we wrap up. It says, from Nxumalo Data, it says, brilliant film. I'd like to learn more about the moment when Gideon played the PAC struggle song at the SABC, his state of mind and politics. He must have known the consequences of that action.
Yeah. Gideon Nxumalo was not politically naive, make no mistake. This was a revolutionary. He got fired from the SABC because he played the music of the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania at the point of, you know, Sharpeville. So he took a political position. Actually, the SABC or South Africa owes this man an honor. We still need to, you know, honor, you know, Gideon. You know, he was a revolutionary. Let's make no mistake. But he was not your crass, you know, politician in that sense. You know, so yeah, he was intellectually, you know, hip. You can just see from his compositions. You know, you're dealing with somebody who, you know, was a thinker. Yeah.
Yeah. I hope Nxumalo got that very clear, that he was not naive at all. His state of mind was in place when he took that decision. The consequences, though, unfortunate, because I think they did contribute to the restraint of maybe his glory in terms of how his work could have gone. And this is just my opinion, Bradlen. But as we wrap up, I'd like to ask a few questions, one closing question, Bradlen, which has to do with, you know, the the documentary and filmmaking, you as an educator, and what could be learned from this making of this film, and also where it's going next, because the interest has been not just by South African music lovers and students and scholars, but it's also, there's a great interest abroad. Well, any advice for young filmmakers, because jazz is at the moment a very enticing medium, and I think there's great opportunity to make these films about these icons, but also where to for this film?
Yeah, no, true. Thank you for that question, Brenda. When I was working with my editor, this question kept on coming, and I said to my editor, I'm not making an entertaining film. I want it to be educational, because that's my, background. But I'm not preachy in terms of being, educational. It still has to have very strong aesthetics and cultural, value. And I think I would be happy if this film is used in music schools, is used in community, centers, so that people can begin to understand a part of cultural, history. And I feel the film can stand its own right in the world. It's not a small little, we're not asking for sympathy here. I think aesthetically, we have represented South African, music, and we believe that we've made a good film that can stand shoulder to shoulder with any other, film. And for young people, I'm always open. I'm a teacher, teacher, yeah. I and yeah, I impart knowledge. Yeah, I don't teach, but I want to engage with younger people, and we share information and knowledge, and we learn from those experiences. And that's why Johnny Merkwa for me was so central. We centered the film at the music school, so that his students are part of the making of the film, because it was all about scoring and reading and playing these difficult notes. So yeah, so I hope the world out there shall look at South African jazz music from another perspective, that it's got its own, place in this world of jazz. There's a South African jazz idiom, that can stand, its place. Yeah.
Well, congratulations, Braglen. Brilliant film, great moment, and privilege to be talking about it with you. And we look forward to hearing bigger stories about how it has broken the mold in many ways. And I'd like to just to say thank you very much and wish you all the best with this film. I wanted to say, when they describe the film, they say it's a lovely made documentary. It explores South African jazz scene through the music of iconic maestro Gideon, and aims to dispel misunderstandings of the aesthetics of jazz and its relationship to traditional African music. Nobody could have been better placed than you and your fellow team members in terms of putting this storyline together, and that makes us pretty proud, and well done on that. As the movie says, when Gideon steps out, we got to go now.
We got to go now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
It's a melodic line. It's a melodic line, said Sol Rachilo.
Oh man, we gotta go now.
We gotta go now. Thank you, Brenda.
All the best. And congratulations to you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you to Mandisa. And I hope, I've answered all the questions, but people can write in. I'll write back. Cheers.
Cheers to everyone. Good night.
Good night, sis.
Well done, we managed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm trying to unhide myself. So sorry about the technical glitches at the beginning.
I think it's okay. It happens with these things. I think when you were asking me the last time if I've done it before, none happens without a little bit of a glitch here and there. But I think it went well ultimately with the conversation. I hope we got as much as you wanted us to get out.